Horror movies are designed to push the boundaries of good taste, but sometimes skittish censors, lightheaded audiences, and flesh-eating predators force certain cuts to be made. In the 1986 version of The Fly, eccentric scientist Seth Brundle is applying the finishing touches to a pair of teleportation pods in his industrial apartment. One evening, after an argument with his new girlfriend Ronnie, a drunken Seth teleports himself on a whim and emerges unscathed. But he didn't notice the housefly in the pod's window. He gradually realizes that his DNA has been spliced with the insects, and soon enough, he gradually morphs into a hideous mutant hybrid creature. Directed by David Cronenberg, The Fly is a powerful story about love and disease that reached a mainstream audience without compromising Cronenberg's signature body horror style. In fact, it features some of the most grotesque imagery of his career, from rashes and abnormal body hair to exploding eyeballs and a ripped-off jaw. However, there was one scene that proved too much for test audiences. The scene eventually showed up on home video releases. It depicted an increasingly deformed Seth using the telepods to fuse a cat with a baboon, creating a monstrous entity that's one part feline and one part primate. Disgusted by what he's done, Seth struggles with the ferocious mutant before bludgeoning it to death with a metal pipe. There are two obvious problems with this scene. First, it's jarringly unsympathetic, even if Seth is losing his mind. Second, the animatronics fail to rise to the occasion, as the creature looks like a bit of a shag carpet.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer premiered at the Chicago International Film Festival on September 24, 1986, almost 2 months after the sixth installment of the Friday the 13th series. Moviegoers at the time could have been forgiven for seeing it as just another slasher film, but Henry actually had little in common with Friday the 13th, or any other schlocky franchise for that matter. As director John McNaughton explained in a 1999 interview, our chief device was removing fantasy. Because as long as you have the buffer of fantasy, then you have a level of comfort and distance. Indeed, there's certainly no comfort or distance in Henry, as it features scenes of sexual assault, torture, and murder in a cold and realist style. One could argue that this is an appropriate manner of depiction compared to its more frivolous slasher contemporaries, but the censors had other concerns. The British Board of Film Classification cut 62 seconds from the theatrical release, and a further 51 seconds for the video release. 4 seconds were cut from a stabbing scene, 38 seconds from a bloody aftermath involving a bottle in a woman's face, and 71 seconds from a disturbing home invasion.
Where are we gonna go now?
We'll find a place.
French filmmaker Alexandre Aja had to cut 10 seconds of violence from his 2008 film Mirrors to secure an R rating from the Motion Picture Association of America. Later in Britain, the BBFC gave the film an 18 rating, owing to its strong gory content. 20th Century Fox wanted a more commercial 15 rating, so they agreed to cuts in 4 instances. The first cuts were made to a scene in which a security guard slits his own throat with a glass shard, causing blood to spray from the deep wound. Then there was the sight of a horrifically burned woman screaming in pain. Cuts also came to perhaps the film's goriest moment, in which a woman's mouth is torn apart in grotesque detail. Finally, frames were removed from another throat-slashing scene towards the end of the film. These cuts pertain only to the theatrical version, as Mirrors was ultimately uncut for its home video releases. Legendary film critic Roger Ebert had a memorably strong reaction to the first Wolf Creek movie back in 2005. As he put it, "What the hell is the purpose of this sadistic celebration of pain and cruelty? If anyone you know says this is the one they want to see, my advice is, don't know that person no more." A majority of critics struck a similar tone, but that didn't stop the eventual release of a sequel, as Wolf Creek 2 delivered another 100+ minutes of Australian outback brutality. The Australian Classification Board gave Wolf Creek 2 an R18+ rating, meaning that no one below the age of 18 could view it in theaters. As the board explained in their decision, it is episodic and realistic, resulting in copious, realistic blood and gore effects, and includes decapitation and dismemberment.
People like me eat people like you for breakfast.
The movie's distributor, Roadshow Films, wasn't satisfied with this appraisal, but what did they expect? Wolf Creek 2 revels in the destruction of human anatomy and the many ways in which it can be done. Australian horror fans surely would have cried foul if it had received anything less. But according to screenwriter Aaron Stearns, the distributors were looking for an audience wider than just the most hardcore horror enthusiasts. So several cuts were made to a revolting headshot, a decapitation, a full body dismemberment, and bloody wounds to one character's face and another's fingers. The 2003 version of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was never outright banned like the 1974 original, but the Motion Picture Association of America did request 2 cuts to avoid an NC-17 rating. First was a suicide by gunshot, as director Marcus Nispel had to reduce the blood and remove the side of a severed ear. He claimed that he was satisfied with this shot despite the cut. As he put it, in the actual cut, the blood is less red, which I think is actually much scarier in a way. I like that it's dark, and I never like blood that looks like syrup or ketchup or whatever. However, Nispel was less enthusiastic about the cuts to a scene in which the villain Leatherface hangs a victim from a dusty old chandelier, pulls the cord of his chainsaw, and cuts him in half from the groin upwards. The censors took their mop and bucket to this scene, removing all the mess and leaving Leatherface's terrible act to viewers' imaginations. As Nispel put it, 2 shots had to go out, which really don't show you all that much, but somehow it leaves me wondering what had really happened to him by removing them. Released in 1987, the original Hellraiser combined sex with violence in a way that troubled the ratings board. As writer-director Clive Barker recalled, "We did a version which had some spanking in it, and the MPAA was not very appreciative of that. They also told me I was allowed 2 consecutive buttock thrusts, but a third would be deemed obscene." Go to hell! Cuts were also made to a murder scene with a hammer, as the number of strikes were reduced, much like the buttock thrusts. Also left out were images of one character's hand in an open, bloody abdomen. Barker's most regretful cut occurred during the finale, in which the character of Frank is torn apart by hooks and chains, as the ratings board took issue with how Frank licked his lips in an odd, masochistic manner. As Barker explained, it was a much longer shot. Body pieces went every place. In another life, I would have let that run slightly longer, as it looked slightly truncated. Mystery surrounds a scene involving a bloody piranha attack in the 1980 found footage film Cannibal Holocaust. The moment was set to depict tribesmen tying an enemy to a log and lowering him into a piranha-infested river, stripping everything below the waterline to the bone. A still of the scene was used to market the film, but the full sequence proved to be elusive. In 2021, Dread Central spoke to Callum Waddle, author of the book Cannibal Holocaust: Devil's Advocates. Waddle quoted Colombian actor Ronaldo Blanca, who said, "I was there for that scene. Director Ruggero Deodato definitely shot it. He called action and he called cut, and some of us had gathered around to watch it and we all applauded. It was a brilliant effect." This isn't the only moment that was cut from Cannibal Holocaust. The film was so shocking that Italian authorities arrested Deodato for the murder of his actors, an accusation he disproved by inviting the very much alive cast to court. The movie was banned in 40 countries and remains prohibited or censored to this day, primarily because of its scenes of real animal slaughter. Gory cult favorite Event Horizon was almost even gorier than what was shown in theaters. The original cut ran over 2 hours long, thanks in part to reels of bloody imagery that were so visceral that some test audience members fainted, as director Paul W.S. Anderson admitted on the DVD commentary.
"I was just enjoying the gruesomeness of it so much, I just probably put way too much in there."
According to the film's effects supervisor, Anderson's early cut gave a more detailed account of the Event Horizon massacre, as it featured graphic mutilation of teeth, legs, and breasts. As Anderson also noted in the commentary track, you can't underestimate the kind of shock this movie had. People were really upset by it. If we'd had more time to work on it, we could have kept a lot of the more gruesome aspects. Ultimately, the Event Horizon that reached theaters was a much shorter 96-minute version that passed the ratings board's approval without incident. The first Paranormal Activity ends with a demon-possessed Katie hurling her boyfriend Mika at the camera, but this wasn't the only possible conclusion. In fact, director Oren Peli weighed up 3 other endings, and 2 of them were quite brutal. In the least violent one, a neighbor calls the cops, who arrive at the house and corner the possessed Katie. Their presence appears to sober her, but then a sudden door slam startles a cop who shoots her dead. The other 2 endings are even more unsettling. Technical concerns stop Peli from filming a scene in which Katie takes the camera and bludgeons Mika to death in a point-of-view style. It's hard to know whether audiences would have laughed or screamed at that. However, Peli fully understood the intense reaction to the conclusion in which Katie kills Mika downstairs, then enters the bedroom and slits her throat in front of the camera. He chose the ending shown in theaters based in part on Steven Spielberg's suggestion.